So friends, the first episode of the season begins in 1455 Wallachia, where we see a woman named Lisa. Lisa wanted to become a doctor, and for that, she approaches Vlad Dracula because Dracula possessed centuries of advanced scientific knowledge. Dracula is impressed by Lisa's courage and ambition, and he agrees to teach her. In return, Lisa helps Dracula reconnect with his humanity. Dracula and Lisa eventually fall in love and get married. 20 years later, in 1475, the church authorities falsely accuse Lisa of witchcraft and burn her alive in Targovista town. The bishop and the church officials found scientific equipment in Lisa's house and assumed that she was using them to perform evil rituals. At that time, Dracula was not there because, at Lisa's request, he was traveling the world to understand people's problems and find solutions for them. When Dracula returns home and learns about Lisa's murder, he is devastated emotionally. Dracula appears before the people of Targovist and declares that if they do not establish peace with him within a year, he will kill all humans in Wallachia. Dracula's son, Alucard, suggests that instead of killing innocent people, he should take revenge on the church. However, Dracula ignores Alucard's advice and attacks him instead. A year after these events, the bishop of the church is hosting a celebration today to prove that they are not afraid of Dracula. The people continue their celebration. At that moment, Dracula arrives, kills the bishop, and destroys the church. He then commands his demon army to wipe out all humans in Wallachia. Dracula's demon army spreads everywhere, causing chaos. Meanwhile, some people start blaming the Belmont family. In reality, the Belmonts were a noble family known for hunting evil monsters, but a few years ago, the church banished them, accusing them of being in league with evil. Now, people believe that the Belmonts released the evil creatures in Wallachia as an act of revenge. And with this, the first episode comes to an end. In the next episode, we see Trevor Belmont in a pub. He was the last member of the Belmont family. Trevor had come to the pub to eat, but a fight breaks out when some people recognize the Belmont family symbol on his clothes. Angered, they attack him, but being a Belmont, Trevor defeats them all. After leaving the pub, Trevor reaches Grezit, hoping to get some food and rest. However, upon arriving, he sees that Dracula's army has been destroying the city for several nights and killed many people. As Trevor walks through the town, he overhears people blaming the speakers for what is happening in Grezit. Now, you might wonder, who are the speakers? The speakers were a nomadic group, a tribe of wanderers, known to possess magical powers. The people of Grezit believed that the speakers were responsible for Dracula's attack. In reality, this rumor was started by the church itself. Why did the church do this? Well, as you all know, Dracula was attacking because of the church. To save itself, the church needed to blame someone else. On his way, Trevor saves an elder speaker from being attacked by church members. After this incident, the elder takes Trevor to his group of speakers. There, Trevor advises them to leave Grezit for their safety. However, the elder refuses. Why? Because his granddaughter is missing, and he won't leave until he finds her. The elder's granddaughter had gone into the catacombs beneath the city to awaken the sleeping soldier, a warrior mentioned in legends. According to the legends, only the sleeping soldier could defeat Dracula. Though Trevor doesn't want to, he agrees to search for her. And with that, episode 2 comes to an end. In the next episode, we see Trevor exploring the catacombs. As he moves deeper, he notices that the catacombs are unusually constructed. This is because the designs and devices inside closely resemble the descriptions of Dracula's castle. Trevor remembers hearing about these structures from his family when he was a child. Inside the catacombs, he finds a stone statue dressed in clothes similar to the speakers. Just then, a giant cyclops attacks him. The cyclops could fire a beam from its eye, and whoever was hit by the beam would turn into stone. Because of this, the elder's granddaughter had also been turned to stone. However, if the cyclops was defeated, its curse would be broken. Trevor fights and defeats the cyclops, breaking the curse. As a result, the elder's granddaughter, Sypha Belnades, is restored to life. Trevor then takes Sypha back to the elder. Meanwhile, the bishop of the church sends a summon for Trevor. This is the same bishop who was responsible for Lisa's execution. The bishop orders Trevor to leave Grezit before sunset. However, His real plan is to have the speakers killed by the town's angry mob in the evening. Not only that, but he tells Trevor that if he leaves the town, the church will restore the Belmont family name since the Belmont family name had been ruined after their banishment. The bishop's offer seemed tempting. However, the speakers refuse to leave without helping the people and fighting against Dracula's forces. Seeing this, Trevor decides to hide them in the Cyclops chamber for their safety. Trevor fights against the corrupted priest and exposes the truth of the church in front of the afflicted people. Episode 3 ends here. Now, in the fourth and final episode of Season 1, we see that as night falls, Dracula's army begins its attack on the afflicted. The first target of Dracula's creatures is the bishop, whom they kill. Not only that, but the creatures taunt the bishop about his lies, corruption, and arrogance, telling him that it is because of his nature that God has abandoned him. When Trevor faces the night creatures, Sypha arrives as well and helps him with her magic. Trevor prepares the afflicted people to defend the town, and together, they successfully protect Grezit from the demons. This is because Trevor belonged to the Belmont family and knew how to kill demons, like using salt against them, how to impale them, and other techniques. However, during the battle, when the ground cracks open, Trevor and Sypha fall into the catacombs beneath the city. As they go deeper inside, they come across the legendary sleeping soldier, who is none other than Dracula's son, Alucard. Yes, friends! In reality, after his father's attack, Alucard had been healing himself there for a year. Since Alucard was half vampire and half human, Trevor didn't trust him, and Alucard also didn't trust Trevor, as the Belmont family had been hunting his kind, vampires and other creatures, for generations. Trevor and Alucard fight, but when Alucard sees Trevor and Sypha's determination, he stops and reveals that he was actually testing them. Not only that, but Alucard also explains that the legend of the sleeping soldier actually came from the future, where it was predicted that he would meet Trevor and Sypha. The three of them now prepare themselves to defeat Dracula. And with that, Season 1 comes to an end. Now, Season 2 begins with a flashback, where we see Lisa at her home in Lupu, giving medicine to an elderly woman. Just then, the bishop of the church and his priests arrive. They ransack and burn down Lisa's house. Not only that, but they capture Lisa and take her away. The church then interrogates her before ultimately burning her alive, all in Dracula's absence. The scene then shifts to the present, showing Dracula, who has assembled his war council. This council consists of various vampire leaders from around the world. In addition, there are two human necromancers, Hector and Isaac, who practice dark magic. In reality, Hector and Isaac were the ones planning this war, as their traumatic pasts had led them to abandon their humanity. However, a Norse vampire leader, Godbrand, disapproves of Hector and Isaac's leadership, arguing that vampires should be the ones planning this war. But Dracula trusts Hector and Isaac more. This is because their hatred for their own kind, humans, makes them more reliable in Dracula's eyes. On the other side, after the battle, the people of Grezit begin rebuilding their town. Meanwhile, Sypha bids farewell to her speakers group because she has to join Trevor and Alucard on their mission. At first, Alucard struggles with the decision to kill his father, but gradually, he begins to accept it, realizing that there is no other choice. Meanwhile, in Dracula's castle, Godbrand approaches Hector and expresses his frustration. He says that there is no planning or strategy in this war. He questions, if Dracula kills all humans, then who will vampires feed on? Hector responds that Dracula wants to wipe out all of humanity and doesn't care how it happens. Hearing this, Godbrand is disappointed. At the same time, Dracula teleports his castle to a new location, and with that, the first episode comes to an end. In the next episode, Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard discuss how they can locate Dracula's castle, especially since Dracula can teleport it to different locations. Trevor suggests that they visit his family home, as beneath the ruins of the Belmont estate, there is a hidden hold where the Belmont family stored tools and information on hunting monsters. Meanwhile, in Dracula's castle, a vampire leader named Carmilla arrives and stirs up even more conflict within the council. Not only that, but she also questions Dracula, asking him why he never turned his wife into a vampire. Meanwhile, as Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard make their way toward the Belmont estate, they are attacked at night by Dracula's forces. The three of them defeat all the demons, except for one, who is badly wounded but manages to escape and make its way back to Dracula's castle. Meanwhile, in the castle, Isaac reflects on his past, remembering how he killed his abusive master and how that incident taught him to hate humanity. Later, Godbrand brings Isaac the dead body of the injured demon, who had succumbed to its wounds near the castle. The reason? So that Isaac could use necromancy on the demon's corpse to extract information in the next council meeting. The vampire leaders once again argue over whether they should attack Arges first or Brella. Carmilla insists that they should attack Brella, but Isaac interrupts and informs everyone that Alucard might be working with a Belmont. He learned this after extracting information from the demon's corpse using necromancy. Hearing this, Carmilla suggests to Dracula that they should send someone near the Belmont estate to keep an eye on the area. Because if Alucard and his group manage to find weapons there, they could become a serious threat to the vampires. With this, episode 2 comes to an end. In the next episode, we see Carmilla trying to convince Hector to create some night creatures so that they can be sent to guard the Belmont estate here. Let me tell you that Hector and Isaac, who practiced necromancy, dark magic, had the ability to use dead human bodies to create evil creatures. Dracula's entire army was made up of these creatures. Meanwhile, Carmilla continues trying to convince Dracula to launch his next attack on the city of Brella. At the same time, Hector begins to recall his past. We see this through a flashback. A year ago, Dracula had traveled as far as the east of Rhodes in search of Hector and had recruited him to build an army. As a child, Hector used dead animals' bodies to create pets, which led to severe abuse from his parents. This experience made Hector despise humans. However, despite his hatred, he never wanted humans to be slaughtered mercilessly. So when Dracula came to recruit him, Hector made Dracula promise that instead of committing a cruel genocide, he would allow a controlled human population to remain in Wallachia after the battle. But, as we now know, Dracula had clearly lied to him. Meanwhile, Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard arrive at the Belmont estate, which is in ruins. There, they discover a sealed door on the ground. Using her magic, Sypha unlocks the door, revealing a massive underground library. Sypha immediately begins her research, while Trevor finds several unique monster-killing weapons, including one called the Morning Star. However, the place felt unsettling, as there were numerous vampire skulls preserved there. And after all, Alucard was still a part of the vampire community. Meanwhile, back at Dracula's castle, a dissatisfied Godbrand voices his concerns about the battle. He believes that if all humans are wiped out, then who will be left for vampires like him to feed on? Dracula ignores Godbrand's words and tells him to leave. After this encounter, Carmilla approaches Godbrand and tries to convince him that they should move Dracula's castle to Brilla. Not only that, but Carmilla also reveals how she killed the vampire who had turned her into one. Apparently, when that vampire became old and stubborn, Carmilla killed him so that she could take control and rule in her own way. According to Carmilla, Dracula was also becoming old and stubborn, and his plans could be dangerous for the other vampires. Episode 3 ends here. Next episode, we see that Godbrand agrees with Carmilla and realizes that Dracula is no longer fit to lead them. They both start planning ways to change Dracula's plans. Meanwhile, in the Belmont library, Trevor finds a magical mirror that allows them to see distant places here. We also see that Trevor and Sypha are becoming good friends. Back in Dracula's castle, Carmilla tries to recruit Hector. Her plan is that if Dracula moves the castle to Brilla, she will overthrow him and become the leader of the vampires. On the other hand, we see Isaac recalling a flashback of how Dracula had saved his life and made him a part of his army, so that Isaac could create night creatures for him. Meanwhile, Godbrand and a few others become bored without human blood, so they go to a nearby village and start killing people. At the same time, Dracula speaks with Isaac, as he knows that his council is beginning to turn against him. Not only that, but Dracula confesses to Isaac that he had lied to Hector about sparing some humans. A little later, Godbrand secretly meets Isaac and suggests that they should continue the battle without Dracula and make their own plan. At that moment, Isaac kills Godbrand, because for him, betraying Dracula was something impossible and unimaginable. Episode 4 ends here. Next episode, we see Isaac burning Godbrand's body and then throwing his ashes off the castle roof. Meanwhile, Carmilla commands her vampire army to assemble in Brilla. Hector also privately talks to Isaac and convinces him that they should attack Brilla first. He then shares this information with Carmilla. Additionally, Hector informs Carmilla that his night creatures have already reached Belmont Estate. Meanwhile, Isaac shares the details of Hector and Dracula's conversation with Dracula. However, he also says that Hector is innocent and naive and that he does not actually want to betray Dracula. Dracula opens up to Isaac about his past and confesses that there was a time when he enjoyed killing people, but now he is exhausted. He says that he only wants revenge for Lisa's murder and that he doesn't care how the battle is planned. Just then, Carmilla and Hector arrive to meet Dracula, and Dracula agrees to attack Brila. After leaving the meeting, Carmilla reveals her true intentions to Hector. She tells him that since he sided with her, he is now part of her betrayal. At this point, Hector realizes that he has been used by Carmilla. He understands that he can neither back out nor abandon the plan anymore. Meanwhile, in the Belmont library, Sypha finds an unfinished locking spell, which can be used to lock Dracula's castle in one place. But just then, the library starts shaking because the night creatures have arrived and are trying to break down the door. Episode 5 ends here. The next episode begins with Trevor fighting the night creatures inside the library. Meanwhile, Alucard uses the magic mirror to locate Dracula's castle, so that Sypha can use the locking spell to trap the castle in one place. At the same time, Dracula moves his castle to Brila, and his vampire leaders gather at the town's bridge to launch their attack. Carmilla forces Hector to resurrect the bishop's dead body so that the bishop can bless the river water, turning it into holy water. Just then, Carmilla's vampire soldiers cross the river using the bridge and attack Dracula's vampire leaders. Many of Dracula's forces fall into the holy water and perish. The remaining forces retreat into the castle, but Carmilla's soldiers follow them inside. Now, both armies engage in battle inside the castle's main hall, and during the chaos, Carmilla escapes with Hector. Meanwhile, in the Belmont library, Sypha completes her locking spell, and Trevor finishes off all the demons. When Sypha tries to move and lock Dracula's castle, she feels that the castle's mechanism is resisting her, causing it to glitch out and teleport repeatedly within Brila. The castle keeps shifting unpredictably, falling onto the bridge, inside Brila town, and even momentarily hovering above the river. As a result, both Carmilla's and Dracula's armies come into contact with the holy water and are wiped out. Finally, Sypha successfully disables the castle's mechanism and teleports it right above the Belmont library, locking it in place. Episode 6 ends here. In the next episode, we see Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard escaping from the Belmont library with the help of Sypha's magic. Now, the three of them enter the castle and take down some remaining vampires. Meanwhile, Dracula goes to his study with Isaac after realizing that Carmilla has betrayed him. When Isaac offers to sacrifice himself for Dracula, Dracula instead uses a magic mirror to send Isaac to a distant desert. Meanwhile, Alucard reaches Dracula and attacks him, with Trevor and Sypha assisting him. The three of them manage to injure Dracula slightly, but he easily overpowers them. He then engages in a one-on-one fight with Alucard. During the fight, they move through the castle, and eventually, the two of them end up in Alucard's childhood room. Here, Dracula sees Alucard's childhood photos and pictures of Lisa and realizes that he is trying to kill his own son. As Dracula hesitates, Alucard takes the opportunity to drive a stake through his heart, killing him. At that moment, Trevor and Sypha arrive and separate Dracula's head from his body, then burn his remains. Dracula is finally dead, and only his wedding ring remains. Alucard feels sorrowful for killing his father, but Trevor and Sypha console him, telling him that because of him, humanity has been saved. The three of them leave the castle, and outside, the sun has already risen. Episode 7 ends here. Now, in the final episode of Season 2, we see Alucard, who decides to turn Dracula's castle into his grave, meaning he wants to stay there in his coffin. However, Trevor entrusts him with the Belmont library as well, saying that it is Alucard's responsibility to protect both of their ancestral homes. Trevor also suggests that Alucard should use the knowledge stored in both places to help the people of the world, and Alucard accepts this responsibility. Meanwhile, Isaac, who is wandering in the desert, is attacked by raiders. He kills them and uses their dead bodies to create his own small army. In Brela, Carmilla plans to return to her region and enslaves Hector with the help of her vampire soldiers, taking him along so she can use him to build her own army. With Dracula now dead, there is no leader in the vampire community, and Carmilla wants to seize this opportunity for power. At the same time, Sypha convinces Trevor to stay with her, and the two set off on a new adventure to hunt and destroy monsters. Before leaving, they bid farewell to Alucard and depart in search of Sypha's group of speakers. Alucard is now completely alone in the castle, and he finally accepts the pain of losing his parents. Overwhelmed with grief, he breaks down and starts crying. With this, Season 2 comes to an end. So, friends, this was the story of the first 2 seasons of Castlevania, and I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you liked this video, make sure to like and share it. And if you don't want to miss the amazing story of Castlevania Season 3, then subscribe to our channel, Midnight Manga, and hit the bell icon, because we keep bringing such videos regularly. So friends, in Castlevania Season 3, 4 stories run parallel to each other. If I explain them all together, you might get confused with all the back and forth. That's why I will explain these stories one by one so that you can understand each of them individually. At the end of Season 2, we saw Belmont and Sypha setting out on their adventurous journey, so their journey will be our first story. The second story will be about Alucard, who is alone, protecting Dracula's castle and the Belmont library. Now, the third story will be about Isaac, who is building his undead army in the desert. And the fourth story will follow Carmilla and Hector, where Carmilla is taking Hector captive and heading toward her kingdom. In the first story, we see Sypha and Belmont traveling through forests, hunting night creatures. Here, we also see that both of them are getting to know each other better during their travels. They arrive in a town called Lindenfeld, where they meet the town's judge. Here, they also encounter Prior Sala, who was disturbed by Dracula's death and wanted to know who had killed him. But before Trevor and Sypha could reveal anything, the judge intervenes and asks Prior Sala and his monks to leave. At this point, we realize that the monks in the town are behaving strangely, and Trevor wants to get to the root of this mystery. The next morning, they meet the judge of Lindenfeld again and reveal their true identities to him. The judge, in turn, reveals that some time ago, night creatures had attacked Lindenfeld. During this attack, the judge and his army fought against the creatures, but one of them managed to enter the town's church. Inside, the creature communicated with a monk in an alien language. Since then, Sala and his monks have completely changed. Moreover, psychologically disturbed individuals have frequently been entering the church ever since. The judge warns Sypha that the monks in the priory are armed, so she and Trevor must be cautious. Meanwhile, in Lindenfeld, we meet a mysterious magician named Saint Germain. He convinces Prior Sala to let him enter the priory, where he discovers a completely wrecked church. For example, books were piled up on the floor, Christ's cross was hanging upside down, and the monks there were behaving very strangely. Saint Germain talks to Sala and also asks him about the symbols on his armband. These symbols actually represented hell. Upon realizing this, Sala allows Saint Germain to study the books there. So that Saint Germain could provide more knowledge to Sala, especially about hell, Sala leaves the room. However, before leaving, he warns Saint Germain that he is not allowed to wander around the priory. Saint Germain then begins studying the books. While outside the priory, Sypha and Trevor are also present. A monk stops them, but they leave shortly after. However, they have already realized that something is definitely wrong inside the priory. In the next scene, we see Trevor arriving in the forests of Lindenfeld, where he meets the judge. They start talking, and the judge shares his experiences with Trevor, explaining how he has been taking care of the town. As they return from the forest, they notice strange symbols marked on the walls of some houses. Meanwhile, inside the priory, Saint Germain continues studying the books and observes the monks talking among themselves. When the monks leave, Saint Germain uses a mysterious stone to guide him and descends the stairs beneath the priory on his way. Saint Germain encounters Sala, who starts questioning him about wandering around. Saint Germain makes an excuse and quickly leaves. He then goes into town, where he meets Sypha. Sypha asks him about his experience inside the priory. The two talk for a while, and Saint Germain reveals that the priory smells like night creatures and that he is searching for something specific inside. Not only that, but they also discuss the strange symbols appearing on some houses in town, as these symbols were odd and hadn't been there before. Just then, Trevor arrives and takes Saint Germain to a tavern in town. Trevor questions him about the priory, and during their conversation, Saint Germain explains that there is possibly an infinite corridor inside. He describes it as a system of doors that can lead to different worlds. Saint Germain believes that the Priory contains a passage to the infinite corridor, which might be connected to hell. He also reveals that by accessing this gate, he might be able to find someone he lost in the past. Meanwhile, Trevor is thinking something entirely different. What if the night creature that entered the Priory that night never actually left? This thought leaves everyone deep in contemplation. That night, Saint Germain experiences terrifying nightmares. He finds himself in a psychedelic environment where he sees images of multiple realities. Eventually, he wakes up from his nightmare and breathes a sigh of relief. The next day, in Lindenfeld, we see the judge scolding a young boy for running around the town. The judge then tells the boy about a secret route where he can find apples for free. Anyway, Saint Germain goes back inside the church and resumes studying the books. There, he comes across a particular book that completely shocks him. Because this book contained information about hell, specifically about how people could be brought back from it. Although the book was written years ago, some of its pages had been torn out recently, which made Saint Germain deeply concerned about Sala's plans. Saint Germain tries to talk to Sala, but Sala completely ignores him. Next, we see Trevor catching some monks who are marking those strange symbols on the walls of houses. Trevor fights both monks, defeats them, and takes one of them to the judge. They all try to force the monk to reveal Sala's plans, but he refuses to say anything. Sypha and Trevor inform the judge that Sala is definitely planning something evil. Meanwhile, we see Saint Germain descending the church stairs. There, he notices a strange light, and as he steps inside, he sees the same night creature that had entered the church earlier. Yes, that's right. The night creature was pinned to a crucifix, which makes Saint Germain realize that Sala and his monks are actually worshipping it. Here, Saint Germain also notices a blood-drawn symbol on the ground, which turns out to be the same symbol he had seen in town. Just then, the creature wakes up and growls. Saint Germain quickly rushes out, only to run into Sala on his way. Saint Germain slyly manipulates Sala in conversation and manages to exit the Priory. Before leaving, he warns Sala that he should abandon the church and flee. Meanwhile, at the judge's quarters, Trevor forces a captive monk to reveal that Sala is keeping the creature in the basement so that it can help him execute his plans. Just then, Saint Germain arrives and informs them that Sala is up to something evil, and those strange symbols on the town's houses must play a role in his plan. They all decide to confront Sala directly and stop him. The plan is to escort Saint Germain to the infinite corridor and then face Sala. On the other side, Sala and his monks communicate with the creature, telling it that their plan will be executed as soon as evening falls. As dusk approaches, Saint Germain and Sypha arrive with the judge's army and call out to Sala. However, since Sala and his monks are in the basement, there is no response. Meanwhile, the creature begins to awaken, and Sala tells the monks that the time for their plan has come. At that very moment, in Lindenfeld, the houses marked with the strange symbols suddenly catch fire, killing everyone inside. As the people perish, their souls are absorbed into the creature within the Priory, making it even more powerful. A battle breaks out between the judge's army and Sala's monks. In the basement, a portal opens, directly connecting to hell, and from it, numerous night creatures begin to emerge. This confirms that the other side of the portal is indeed hell. For a brief moment, Dracula and Lisa can be seen there. Trevor begins fighting the night creatures, and the creature in the Priory breaks free from the crucifix. Sypha battles the monsters pouring out of the portal, while Trevor tries to kill the creature. However, since it has absorbed so many souls, it refuses to die. Meanwhile, the judge comes face to face with Sala, and Sala stabs him with a knife. As he lies dying, the judge tells Sala that the fight isn't over and reveals the existence of a secret passage. The judge collapses to the ground, but strangely starts laughing. At the same time, Saint Germain struggles to close the portal. From hell, Dracula looks through the portal and reaches his hand forward. Saint Germain embeds his magical stone into one of the creature's eyes, causing the portal's position to shift from hell to a different location. The creature then throws Saint Germain through the portal, and as the portal begins to close, Saint Germain thanks Trevor and Sypha for their help. He explains that he was searching for someone in the infinite corridor, and from his reaction, it seems like he has finally found them. Before the portal shuts completely, Saint Germain promises Trevor and Sypha that he will meet them again soon. Then, The portal vanishes. Right after this, Trevor uses all his strength to finally kill the creature. After defeating the monsters, Cypher reaches the judge, who tells her that Sala is dead. He even gives them instructions on where to find Sala's body and tells them to burn down his house. Following the judge's instructions, Cypher finds Sala impaled and dead in a pit in the river forest. Inside the same pit, she also notices several small skeletons. Finding this strange, Trevor and Cypher return to the judge's house, where they discover a secret room filled with numerous small children's shoes. They now realize that the judge had a hidden life. He had been luring the town's children to the pit near his apple tree and killing them. The shoes were his twisted trophies. If you remember, in an earlier scene, the judge had sent a child toward the apple tree, and that child was never seen again. This means the child must have fallen into the judge's pit and died. Angered by this horrifying truth, Cypher burns down the judge's house with her magic. The two then leave the town, and Trevor expresses that he no longer wishes to continue fighting monsters. This marks the end of the first and biggest story. Now, the second story follows Alucard, who is trying to adjust to his lonely life. However, as viewers, we begin to see how his isolation is taking a toll on his psychological state. Meanwhile, in the forest, Alucard hears footsteps and eventually encounters two people who had been searching for him. These two were vampire hunters named Sumi and Taka. They had come looking for Cho, a vampire who was once part of Dracula's army. Although Cho was already dead, they sought Alucard's help so they could continue hunting vampires in the future. Alucard brings Sumi and Taka into his castle and learns how Cho had once captured them. She kept them imprisoned, forcing them to fight her repeatedly while she killed them off one by one. They were tortured every day, but they had been waiting for an opportunity to escape and take their revenge. However, before they could act, Cho was summoned by Dracula to join his war council. Seizing this chance, Sumi and Taka killed all of Cho's guards and freed the prisoners. After that, they set out in search of Cho, which eventually led them to Alucard. Sumi and Taka begin training under Alucard in the forest, but it seems as if they do not fully trust him. Alucard gives them a tour of his castle and library, teaching them about vampire anatomy. However, in private, Sumi and Taka discuss their doubts about him. Later, Alucard shows them around the castle's rooms. They ask him about the castle's secrets, but he avoids answering. One night, while Alucard is asleep, Sumi and Taka approach him and the three begin to get intimate. Suddenly, Sumi ties Alucard to the bed, rendering him unable to move. At this moment, we as viewers realize that they had been planning to kill Alucard all along, believing that by learning the castle's secrets, they could hunt down all vampires. However, before they can execute their plan, Alucard uses his magical sword to slit their throats, killing them instantly. Heartbroken, Alucard laments the betrayal, as he had trusted them and taught them everything. But due to their lack of trust, he was forced to kill them. After this tragic event, Alucard hangs Sumi and Taka's bodies outside the castle as a warning to deter any humans from approaching. In this chilling moment, we see how Alucard is slowly becoming more like Dracula. This marks the end of the second story. Now, the third story follows Carmilla and Hector. Carmilla arrives in her homeland, Styria, where she reunites with her vampire sisters, Striga, Morana, and Lenore, who have been waiting for her for over a month. Carmilla had traveled this entire journey on foot, which left her feeling irritated. Meanwhile, Hector was now their prisoner, stripped naked and thrown into a cell where he was tortured. Carmilla suggests to her sisters that, in Dracula's absence, they should take control of the eastern territories. To guard these borders, she plans to use Hector to create an army for them. However, the problem was that Hector had been tortured so severely that convincing him to cooperate would be difficult. To solve this, Lenore takes on the responsibility of persuading Hector. She approaches him in his cell, where Hector attempts to trick and kill her. But Lenore is far stronger than him and easily defeats him. She also punishes him for his actions. The next day, Lenore returns to Hector's cell. This time, Hector reveals that he knows about Carmilla's plans. They start talking, and Lenore asks Hector what he truly wants. Dracula had deceived and used him, but perhaps she could actually give him what he desires. Hearing this, Hector lets down his defenses, and they continue discussing things. Gradually, Lenore begins manipulating Hector, gaining his trust by providing him with clothes and treating him better. As she starts winning over Hector, she suggests that they should go for a walk. However, following Striga's advice, Lenore puts Hector on a leash before taking him outside. Hector, slowly influenced by Lenore's words, begins to agree with her reasoning, making him more vulnerable. From a distance, Carmilla, Striga, and Morana listen to Lenore and Hector's conversation, mocking Hector in the process. Later, when Lenore takes Hector back to his cell, she places him in a new one. This time, a more comfortable cell with a study and a bed. Here, we see how Lenore tries to seduce Hector as part of her manipulation. The scene then shifts to Striga, who is unable to sleep. She studies maps, trying to come up with a solid battle plan. Morana advises her to rest, but Striga is too troubled, as she is in charge of war planning. Meanwhile, Lenore successfully manipulates Hector into becoming intimate with her. During their physical involvement, she tricks Hector into verbally confirming his loyalty to her. Seizing the opportunity, Lenore places a magical ring on Hector's finger, binding him under a powerful spell. Yes, this magical ring forces Hector into absolute loyalty to Lenore. If he ever tries to betray her, the ring will cause him unbearable pain. After all, Hector himself had declared his loyalty in a vulnerable moment. Despite the intimate situation, Lenore humiliates Hector by treating him like a pet. She puts him on a leash and presents him to her sisters, proudly revealing her plan. Lenore explains that she had a magician create special rings imbued with a binding spell. Since Hector now wears one, he is completely loyal to her. This means that any night creatures Hector creates will also be loyal to Lenore. Furthermore, Lenore had crafted additional rings for her sisters, ensuring that Hector's creatures would be bound to all four of them. Her sisters admire her cunning strategy, while Hector realizes he has once again been used and manipulated. As Lenore leads him away, she cruelly tells him that she has essentially turned him into her pet, just like how Hector, as a child, used to turn dead animals into pets. Thus, the third story comes to an end. Now, in the fourth and final story, we see Isaac passing through the desert. He has already built a loyal army of night creatures. He arrives at a shop where a trader gifts him a distant mirror. Using this mirror, Isaac is able to see Hector imprisoned in the cells of Styria. Seeing Hector's betrayal, Isaac desires to punish him. But little does he know, Hector is already suffering greatly. With the mirror in his possession, Isaac prepares to leave. However, outside, he is confronted by guards who order him to leave the area. Isaac tries to reason with them, but when they refuse to listen, he unleashes his night creatures upon them. Isaac then proceeds to the port, where he meets a man named the Captain. The Captain offers to take Isaac to Genoa on his ship in exchange for a guarantee that Isaac's night creatures won't harm him or his crew. Additionally, Isaac promises to pay the Captain some coins for the journey. During the voyage, Isaac shares his story with the Captain. In return, the Captain advises Isaac that instead of seeking revenge, he should use his power and knowledge to teach humanity kindness. Hearing this, Isaac is left deep in thought. Eventually, Isaac reaches Genoa, but there, a sergeant blocks his path. Isaac tries to negotiate, but when the sergeant and his army refuse to listen, Isaac once again unleashes his night creatures upon them. As he moves forward, Isaac speaks with one of his night creatures. He asks the creature if it remembers what its life used to be like before its transformation. The creature tells Isaac that it was once a scholar in Athens but was tortured there. To survive, it betrayed others, which led to its damnation in hell, eventually transforming into a night creature. The creature thanks Isaac because he has given it a new life. Moving forward in his journey, Isaac arrives in an abandoned town controlled by a magician who has enslaved the townspeople. An old magician named Miranda informs Isaac about this situation. She tells him that she is no longer as strong as she once was, so she cannot fight the magician herself. Miranda reveals that the magician possesses a large transmission mirror, which could allow Isaac to transport his entire army to Styria. However, before using it, Isaac must first defeat the magician, which won't be easy, as the magician has turned the entire town into his personal army. Hearing this, Isaac immediately heads toward the magician's town. Along with his army of night creatures, he engages in a fierce battle against the magician's enslaved soldiers. However, the magician's forces eventually overpower Isaac's army, forcing Isaac to move toward a green lighthouse, where the magician is hiding. Along the way, more of the magician's slaves try to block Isaac's path, but he keeps pushing forward. Not only does Isaac eliminate these slaves, but he also turns them into night creatures, increasing his own numbers. Upon reaching the top of the lighthouse, Isaac confronts the magician. The magician attempts to control Isaac's mind, and for a few moments, it seems as though Isaac has fallen under his influence. However, Isaac ultimately overpowers the magician and kills him, breaking the magical control over the town's enslaved people. As the spell is lifted, bodies begin to collapse all around, and Isaac decides to use them to create an even larger army, since all these people were already dead. Isaac also finds the transmission mirror, which will allow him to transport his entire army to Styria. And with that, Season 3 comes to an end. Moreover, Season 3 reveals that the night creature at the Priory belonged to Isaac, which explains why it was trying to bring Dracula back. So, in the next season, I think someone will attempt to resurrect Dracula once again. The real question is, will they succeed, or will they fail and end up joining Dracula in hell? At the end of the season, we see that Trevor still wants to fight monsters. However, since Alucard is slowly becoming more like Dracula, there's a chance that in the future, Trevor and Sypha might have to fight against Alucard. Saint Germain could play a role in helping Trevor, especially since he mentioned that he would meet Trevor again soon. We haven't been given much information about Saint Germain or the person he lost in the Infinite Corridor. So, I think we'll get to learn more about Saint Germain in Season 4. One last prediction: Dracula might return, and this time, he could join forces with Alucard to defeat the armies that Carmilla and her sisters are building. So, friends, these were my observations and predictions for Castlevania Season 4. I really hope you found them interesting. Till then, like this video and subscribe to our channel, Midnight Manga, because we keep bringing such videos regularly. Friends, I recently watched the final season of Castlevania on Netflix, so, in today's video, we will briefly discuss the story of Season 4, which is the final season, and also talk about the ending of the show and some related theories. Before starting the video, let me tell you that if you haven't watched my previous video on Castlevania, I would highly recommend that you go and watch it first so that this video makes complete sense to you. So, Season 4 begins with Belmont and Sypha, who have set out again after the battles and destruction of Season 3. Along the way, they encounter several dark creatures. They come across some skeletal warriors controlled by a necromancer, and the two of them take them down. They also run into other dark creatures worshipping a picture of Dracula, and they eliminate them as well. Inside a church, they find a vampire attempting a spell, which he was using to bring Dracula back to life. Sypha and Belmont kill him, and gradually, we viewers begin to see how these incidents are affecting Sypha. She was slowly turning into someone like Belmont and was not particularly happy with this adventurous life. A week earlier, they had encountered some cultists who were about to sacrifice children. Sypha and Belmont kill the cultists and save the children. Here, they also realize that the cultists were worshipping the Grim Reaper, also known as Death itself. And here, Belmont kills some more dark creatures that had come searching for magical weapons. From a distance, two vampire allies see Belmont and Sypha emerging from the armory. One of these vampires is named Varney. Varney claims that he was Dracula's right-hand man and that Dracula was going to give him Targovist. He is not pleased to see Belmont and Sypha there. Meanwhile, Alucard is drunk in his castle, and outside the castle, we see some dead and decaying bodies impaled on spikes. At that moment, a horse approaches the castle, carrying a corpse. The dead man has a message or note in his hand from the people of a place called Dynasty, asking for Alucard's help because they have been attacked by night creatures and demons. This place is about 20 miles from Dracula's castle's new location. Alucard prepares to go there, but before leaving, he respectfully buries the messenger's body, showing that his humanity is not completely gone. Meanwhile, in Styria, Hector, though still bound by Lenore's spell, enjoys a fair amount of freedom. He has his own room, a library, and even consumes drinks from Carmilla's private collection. Not only that, but he also has a secret magic mirror through which he communicates with Varney, suggesting that the two are plotting something. Additionally, he keeps placing strange stones into the cracks of the castle, the function of which will be revealed later. Lenore, on the other hand, is bored and frustrated because Carmilla's war plans make her uncomfortable, especially since they will result in many unnecessary deaths. She shares her concerns with Hector and urges him to complete his magic hammer as soon as possible because their plan depends on Hector's magical skills, and he can only create night creatures using the magic hammer. Carmilla does not fully trust Hector and is angry at him for taking so long. She is determined to take control of the entire world and doesn't care how many lives are lost in the process. Meanwhile, Belmont and Sypha arrive at a barn in Targovist to spend the night, where they encounter Varney, his ally Ratko, and some night creatures. Belmont and Sypha fight the night creatures while Varney and Ratko watch the battle from a distance. In the middle of the fight, Zamfir arrives. She is the head guard of Targovist's underground court. Zamfir helps Belmont and Sypha, and after the fight, she reveals that after Dracula's first attack, the Targovist royal family had survived. Now, she fights against night creatures and protects the city. She seeks Belmont and Sypha's help, but both parties do not fully trust each other. Meanwhile, Varney and Ratko are also searching for Targovist's underground court so they can obtain the magical weapons stored in the armory. After the fight, we viewers see Belmont picking up a strange stone from a body, the purpose of which will be revealed later. Meanwhile, Isaac is with his night creatures, and he has ordered his army to bury the dead bodies from the previous season. One of the night creatures approaches Isaac and asks why he is doing this instead of focusing on his attack. In response, Isaac gives a metaphor about a berry. He explains that a hammer can be used to break things or to build them. The night creature, who usually feeds on blood and flesh, tries the berry and wants another one. Isaac then teaches him that just because something feels normal and natural doesn't mean it is right. Isaac hasn't changed his plan, but he is definitely reconsidering his approach. After killing the old wizard last season, Isaac gained his own agency. Previously, he was just Dracula's follower, without any personal agenda of his own. At that moment, Varney calls Isaac through the magic mirror and talks about bringing Dracula back. But Isaac wanted to focus on his own mission first, meaning he was no longer just a blind follower of Dracula. He had his own journey and his own purpose. Meanwhile, Morana and Striga, who had left Styria to execute Carmilla's plans, were unhappy with them. They had spent their entire lives fighting wars and were not particularly pleased with it. At that moment, some villagers fired an arrow at them. Since it was daytime, Striga quickly placed Morana inside a coffin for protection and donned her armor to fight. Striga easily defeated the villagers, but she realized that they had only attacked out of fear. Morana and Striga were growing weary of these endless wars, which had only led to humanity's destruction. Just then, they received a message from Carmilla saying that Hector had begun creating night creatures, so they had to return. On the other hand, Belmont and Sypha still didn't fully trust Zamfir. They didn't want to become someone else's puppets again. However, Zamfir wanted them to join Targovist's royal army. Here, we also see another significant moment. The strange stone that Belmont had found near a corpse fits perfectly into a magical dagger. This was the same dagger that Belmont had found in the armory. Like Isaac, Belmont and Sypha no longer wanted to be manipulated by others. They didn't want to join someone else's fight, but instead sought their own agency and purpose. This is why they hesitated to become part of Zamfir's battle. Meanwhile, in Alucard's storyline, he arrives in Dynasty, where night creatures have been attacking. He swiftly defeats them, and the village's headwoman, Greta, tells him how they have been tormented by night creatures for 4 nights. Greta asks about her messenger, Marius, and Alucard informs her of his death. Here we also see Saint Germain, who had been hiding during the fight, and through a series of flashbacks, we learn how he ended up in Dynasty. How? Over the past few years, Saint Germain's reputation had declined. How? He lost his wife in the Infinite Corridor. How? At the end of the previous season, he found himself back in the Infinite Corridor, where he encountered another alchemist. This alchemist told him that in order to bring back his love, he would need to make a sacrifice. The alchemist also explained that the ultimate goal of alchemy is the union of spirit and matter, male and female, the very force that controls the Infinite Corridor. This scene strongly suggests that there is some connection between this philosophy and Dracula's resurrection. The alchemist gives Saint Germain an alchemic key that allows him to open the Infinite Corridor anywhere. Not only that, But we also see how, after this interaction, Saint Germain continues his journey, gradually sacrificing his ethics and morals. He becomes increasingly obsessed with his task. During this time, he meets Varney, who proposes the idea of resurrecting Dracula. However, Saint Germain doesn't show much respect toward him. Still, this plan is undoubtedly beneficial for Saint Germain, and we see him back with Alucard and Greta in the present. He advises them to move the villagers to Alucard's castle for their safety. However, Saint Germain's true intentions remain unknown for now. Greta does not fully trust him, and we learn that after spending so much time in the Infinite Corridor, a trace of magic, especially dark magic, has left a mark on Saint Germain, which Greta is suspicious of. In the previous episode, we saw Belmont and Sypha's action sequences, and now we get to see Alucard in battle. Meanwhile, in Styria, Hector begins creating night creatures and sends them out on missions. However, Lenore is unhappy with this process. She is troubled by the fact that Carmilla spends all her time making plans and schemes. Furthermore, if Carmilla succeeds in ruling the entire world, there would be no need for Lenore's diplomatic skills, and she fears that Carmilla may no longer have any use for her. This situation parallels how Dracula once deceived Hector and used him for his mission, just as Carmilla is now doing the same to Lenore. Alucard and Greta lead the people of Dynasty toward Alucard's castle. However, on the way, they must pass through forests and other dangerous areas infested with night creatures. Alucard easily slays the night creatures, and we, as viewers, see that he and Greta are beginning to bond. On the other hand, Belmont and Sypha try to learn more about Zamfir in Targovist, but they are unhappy with her decisions. Zamfir takes what little food remains in Targovist and offers it to her king and queen, whom Belmont and Sypha have never even seen, while the people of Targovist starve to death. Belmont theorizes that if there is an underground tunnel beneath Targovist where the royal court is hiding, then there must be enough space for vampires to be hiding there as well. At that moment, a night creature emerges from the ground and goes after Zamfir. Not only that, but it attaches some kind of magical pin to her, possibly a corrupting or controlling instrument. Meanwhile, if we talk about Isaac. During this time, Isaac's army launches an attack on Carmilla's castle. Isaac orders his army to keep Hector alive so that he can personally take his revenge. This enrages Carmilla, while Lenore grows increasingly worried for Hector's life. However, Hector was already prepared. He had been in contact with others and had been considering a plan to revive Dracula. Not only that, but he had set traps all over the castle and was hiding strange stones in the cracks of its walls. Hector reveals all of this to Isaac, but Isaac did not come to kill him. Isaac tells Hector that both of them have been mere puppets for too long, and now it's time for them to choose their own paths. He orders Hector's night creatures to stand down, but Hector cannot comply because he is still wearing the control ring. In a desperate move, Hector takes Isaac's knife and cuts off his own finger, removing the ring from his hand. As a result, Carmilla loses control over his night creatures. The battle between Carmilla and Isaac. Hector's escape tunnel leads Isaac straight to Carmilla's room, where an intense battle ensues. Isaac's night creatures aid him, but despite being outnumbered, Carmilla slaughters them one by one. Their bodies are scattered across the floor, and blood soaks every surface. Ultimately, Carmilla grows exhausted. Unwilling to surrender to Isaac, she chooses to take her own life. Before dying, she promises Isaac that she will be waiting for him in hell. When Morana and Striga return, they find their home reduced to ruins and sense Carmilla's death. Instead of trying to reclaim the castle, they choose to leave and start a peaceful life together. Isaac and Hector's choice. Hector also faces a decision, whether to revive Dracula or let him rest. Isaac firmly believes that Dracula deserves rest, and the two of them decide to move forward in life. Hector wishes to live quietly with Lenore, focusing on studying, creating things, and exploring rather than being controlled by someone else's orders. For the first time, Isaac also wishes to truly live and build a life of his own. Meanwhile, Varney and Ratko. Varney and Ratko successfully locate the royal court after secretly attaching a tracking device to Zamfir. Now that they have its location, Ratko abandons Varney, believing himself to be a superior soldier, whereas Varney is nothing more than a criminal. At the same time, Belmont and Sypha also wish to see the royal court, and it looks like another fight is about to take place. A small detail. At Alucard's castle, Saint Germain continues to carve sigils and consults his strange notebook. He remains in contact with his associates and informs them that he has found the location he was searching for. Meanwhile, Belmont and Sypha reach the royal court, only to find the people of Targovist starving and dehydrated. Even more disturbingly, Zamfir has preserved the rotten skeletons of her king and queen, believing they will one day awaken and save everyone. It is clear that she is psychologically distressed. To make matters worse, the starving people are dying right next to pools of holy water. Zamfir refuses to let them drink from it because, in her eyes, that water is essential for protecting the court against vampires and night creatures. After a long time, Zamfir finally realizes that her king and queen will never return. Just then, Ratko and his night creatures arrive. Varney, Ratko, and their night creatures attack the royal court of Targovist, slaughtering people, while Belmont, Sypha, and Zamfir try to defend them. Meanwhile, at Alucard's castle, an army of night creatures massacres the people of the dynasty, activating the magical sigils created by Saint Germain. Using his key, Saint Germain opens the infinite corridor, pulling the souls of the slain into it. The army of night creatures overwhelms Alucard and Greta, forcing them to retreat inside the castle. As the floating dead souls follow them, Alucard reaches his childhood room, where Saint Germain is fully opening the infinite corridor. Because this was the place where Alucard had killed Dracula, the spell would work most effectively here to bring him back. Not only that, but Saint Germain also wanted to resurrect Dracula's wife, Lisa, and fuse them together into a divine entity, an ultimate goal of alchemy. Saint Germain had begun to see himself as almost a god. Meanwhile, in Targovist, Belmont faces Ratko while Sypha and Zamfir battle the remaining night creatures. Varney, on the other hand, is searching for a magical mirror away from the battlefield. As Ratko had claimed, he was an exceptional fighter and almost defeated Belmont, but his arrogance led to his downfall. Ratko attempts to kill a mother and child, but Zamfir sacrifices herself to protect them. Belmont arrives and kills Ratko. Meanwhile, Varney finds the mirror hidden behind the dead king and queen's thrones. Through it, he sees Saint Germain opening the portal in the infinite corridor. Varney steps through the mirror into the corridor, and Belmont and Sypha follow, but they end up in a different location. Back at Alucard's castle, the fight against the night creatures continues. Belmont and Sypha teleport nearby, reuniting with Alucard. Together, they fight off the night creatures. An important plot point is revealed. Varney is actually an elemental spirit that feeds on death. His goal was to resurrect Dracula to create mass death on a large scale. Not only that, but he wanted to fuse Dracula and Lisa into a single rabid entity. For a brief moment, Dracula and Lisa are pulled through the portal and trapped inside, but Belmont destroys the barrier just in time. Realizing his mistake, Saint Germain helps them and destroys the rabid entity. This triggers a massive explosion in the castle. In his final moments, Saint Germain sees his wife through the portal, and she turns around just as the portal closes. Now enraged, the elemental spirit, Death, absorbs Saint Germain's key to power itself up. Before facing death, Belmont confesses his love to Sypha. He then powers up the magical dagger and attacks Death, stabbing its skull. The explosion from Death's destruction obliterates everything around them. Here, another major revelation occurs. Varney was actually Death itself, the Grim Reaper. He wanted to revive Dracula so that Dracula could kill thousands, making Death even more powerful. Meanwhile, Hector and Lenore discuss strength and power. How strength isn't just about winning wars but also about using it to protect others. Lenore refuses to live in a cage any longer and, for the first time, steps out into the sunlight, where she burns and perishes. Alucard begins to embrace his human side and grows closer to Greta. The refugees from the dynasty now take shelter in his castle. However, the person who suffers the most is Sypha, who is pregnant with Belmont's child and remains silent in grief over his supposed death. She wants to leave and live among her people, but Alucard stops her, proposing that they build a community in this place. Sypha likes the idea. Just then, a hooded rider arrives on a horse. It's none other than Belmont himself. Badly wounded and weakened, he theorizes that Saint Germain might have opened the infinite corridor at the last moment to save his life. All the characters feel a sense of relief, and the scene shifts to Vlad Tepes and his lover Lisa, Dracula and Lisa, checking into a hotel. They are now free from hell and together again. However, they are unaware of what exactly happened to them. They decide to stay away from Alucard for the time being so that he can find closure, and they plan to travel together. Season 4 ends here. So, friends, this was the story of the final season of Castlevania. As you can see, all the characters have completed their arcs, and everyone has found closure. This most likely means that this was the last season. I have also explained some of the theories related to the season, and the biggest twist was about death, where we learned that Varney was actually death itself. Death wanted Dracula to return so that he could kill countless people, making death even more powerful. I hope you found this video interesting. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and share it. And before you leave, make sure to subscribe to our channel, Midnight Manga, because we keep bringing such videos regularly. Peace.